The sea was merciless that night, thrashing against the hull of the Crimson Vow as if angry at the sins it carried. Captain Elias Vane stood at the prow, his long coat whipping in the wind, dark as his reputation. His crew, cutthroats and misfits, dragged aboard a small figure cloaked in a soaked nun's habit. She had been fleeing, though from what, Elias didn't yet care. "Look what the tide spat out, Captain," his quartermaster sneered, shoving back her hood. A woman, mid-20s, with sharp gray eyes, not meek, not afraid. Her face was dirted by the road, but her gaze was clean, piercing through the fog of the captain's soul. Sister Magdalena. The name meant little to Elias. The reward on her head, however, glittered brighter than any jewel. Rumors spoke of her fleeing a corrupt convent where secrets rotted holier-than-thou robes. That made her valuable. Yet something irked him, the way she faced him, unflinching, her fingers clutching a wooden cross as though it were a blade. "What will your God do for you here, sister?" Elias mocked. Magdalena met his scorn with a quiet strength. "God is in the storm, Captain, and you're sailing straight into him." Amused, Elias gave orders to lock her below deck. But as the nun disappeared into the ship's belly, a sliver of unease coiled in his gut. Not fear of her faith, but of what had awakened in him. Somewhere deep beneath his cynical armor, Elias Vane felt the faintest ripple of something he had long forgotten. Conscience. Tonight, a pirate had captured a nun. But perhaps, unknowingly, he had also invited a storm aboard. And this storm wore a veil. The brig of the Crimson Vow was a dark, damp cage of rotting wood and rusted iron. Chains clinked as Magdalena was shoved into a corner, her wrist shackled, but her resolve untouched. The rocking of the ship seemed to cradle her prayers as she knelt, whispering into the hollow silence. Above deck, Captain Elias Vane nursed a flask of rum, but tonight the burn did little to drown out the nun's voice. Her murmured prayers were soft, yet they struck louder than cannon fire, rattling through the hull, into his skull. He had silenced men with a glare, broken wills with a blade, but this woman's faith knotted him more effectively than iron manacles. His crew grumbled about bad omens. A woman of God on a pirate ship was asking for divine punishment. Elias scoffed outwardly, but inside, he wondered, could she truly believe her invisible God would come for her? Or was she simply another liar wearing holiness as a mask? Driven by equal parts annoyance and curiosity, Elias stormed down to confront her. "Do you think your prayers will save you, sister?" he asked, looming like a shadow. Magdalena's eyes met his, not pleading, not angry, but certain. "My prayers are not for me, Captain. They're for you." For a moment, Elias was disarmed. The pirate in him wanted to laugh, but the man beneath felt something shift. "You're wasting your breath, girl. My soul was damned the moment I hoisted the black flag." "Then it's time someone taught you to lower it," she said softly. He left her there, more rattled than before. She was a prisoner, chained and powerless, yet somehow, she was the only one holding a key. Elias Vane, king of rogues, was starting to lose control. And he hated it. The dawn brought no peace. The sea, gray and heaving, mirrored the tension aboard the Crimson Vow. Through the mist, dark shapes emerged, sleek ships flying no colors but death. Bounty hunters. Ruthless men hired by the church and crown alike. They weren't after gold this time. They wanted the nun. "Raise the guns. Prepare to fight." Elias barked. His crew scrambled, but in his gut, he knew the odds were grim. They had speed, but not enough firepower. Retreat was not an option. Below deck, Magdalena felt the shift in the air. Footsteps thundered, the ship's timbers groaned. The hunters had found them. A young deckhand, barely more than a boy, fumbled with her chains. His eyes were wide with fear. "Captain'll kill me for this," he muttered, freeing her. "But something says you ain't the curse they think." Freed, Magdalena climbed to the deck, her habit clinging wetly to her frame as the salt wind lashed her face. The battle had begun, smoke, gunfire, steel against steel. Amidst the chaos, she spotted Elias cornered, blood on his brow, his blade locked against two bounty men. Without thinking, she seized a fallen pistol. Her hands trembled, but her aim was true. The shot rang out, sending one bounty man sprawling. Elias turned, eyes narrowing in shock. "You took up arms, sister," he shouted, parrying the second attacker. "Even saints know when to fight, Captain," she retorted, tossing him a fresh cutlass. Together, they fought, not as pirate and prisoner, but as allies in the storm. By battle's end, the bounty hunters lay scattered, their ship limping away. As calm returned, Elias faced her. "Careful, sister. You're starting to sound like one of us." Magdalena's smile was small, but it struck him harder than any cannonball. Night cloaked the crimson vow in uneasy stillness. The crew, bruised and battered from the skirmish, kept their distance, wary of the nun whose prayers seemed to twist fate itself. Yet, beneath the stars, on the quiet quarterdeck, Magdalena stood, unbothered, her fingers brushing the worn wood of her cross. Elias watched from the shadows, torn between irritation and intrigue. This woman, chained mere hours ago, had risked her life to save his. For what? A debt of honor? A foolish sense of duty? Or was her faith truly that blind? "Tell me, sister," he said, stepping into the moonlight. "What devil's bargain did you strike today?" "You prayed, and the storm itself turned its wrath upon my enemies." "I struck no bargain, Captain," Magdalena replied, her gaze calm. "But perhaps God has not given up on you as you have." Elias sparked a laugh, but it lacked its usual venom. For once, he dropped the swagger. "Do you know what faith got me? A noose around my neck. I served the king's navy once. Bled for a crown that discarded me like filth when I exposed a noble's crimes. Branded a pirate. Left to rot." The bitterness in his voice was a blade, sharp and jagged. Yet, Magdalena did not flinch. "Then you know betrayal. But vengeance is a poor compass, Captain. It leads only to ruin." Her words struck deeper than he cared to admit. For a long moment, silence stretched between them, not cold, but contemplative. The pirate and the nun, two exiles from different worlds, bound by wounds neither could see. As Magdalena knelt to pray, Elias did not mock her this time. Instead, he remained, listening to her whispered words, unsure if they were meant for God or for him. That night, something shifted. Not the sea, but the man. Beneath the deceptive calm of the morning tide, treachery simmered aboard the Crimson Vow. Rourke, Elias' first mate, a broad-shouldered brute with a thirst for power, had seen enough. In hushed whispers, he stoked the crew's unease. "A nun on a pirate ship? We're cursed, lads. Captain's gone soft. Trading our gold for sermons." His poison spread quickly among the discontented. Elias noticed the sideways glances, the muttered oaths. But it was Magdalena who warned him outright. "Beware of those closest to you, Captain. Judas did not come with a blade, he came with a kiss." He dismissed her words with a scoff, but unease gnawed at him. That night, as thunderheads gathered, the mutiny struck. Rourke, emboldened by his conspirators, seized the helm, blade pressed to Elias' throat. "Step down, Vane. You've lost your edge. This ship needs a real pirate, not a nun's lapdog." Magdalena, dragged onto the deck, bore the brunt of their fury. "Witch," they spat. "Bringer of bad omens." The heavens seemed to respond. Lightning cracked, illuminating her rain-slicked figure, standing tall despite the bruises. Her voice, though battered, rang clear. "If you fear God's judgment, you should, for it's upon you now." As if in answer, a bolt of lightning struck the mainmast, splintering it with a deafening roar. Men screamed, diving for cover. In the chaos, Elias broke free, his blade flashing with righteous fury. Betrayers fell beneath his wrath, Rourke among them, sent overboard into the churning abyss. When the storm abated, Elias turned to Magdalena. "I don't believe in miracles, sister. But tonight, I'll make an exception." Breathless, bloodied, yet alive, they stood amid the wreckage. And as the crew knelt, not to Elias, but to the woman they once cursed, he realized she had done the impossible. She had made them believe, even if he wasn't ready to admit it yet. With the ship battered and the crew shaken, Elias steered the Crimson Vow toward Isla de Velas, a pirate haven where gold silenced questions. The island sprawled like a serpent upon the sea, its narrow alleys filled with merchants, thieves, and cutthroats draped in false civility. It was a place where masks were worn as boldly as weapons. For Magdalena, it was a walk through a den of vipers. Disguised in a plain merchant dress, her veil tucked away, she trailed beside Elias, her eyes wary but unbowed. "A place built on lies," she murmured. Elias smirked. "A fitting sanctuary for liars like me." Yet, eyes followed them, some curious, others hungry. Word had spread of the nun aboard the Crimson Vow, of miracles and mutinies. Allies were few, enemies countless. In the shadow of a crumbling chapel, Magdalena paused to light a candle. Amidst the grime and rot, she knelt, lips moving in prayer. Watching her, Elias felt a discomfort he couldn't name. Why did her small acts of faith unsettle him more than 100 swords? Their respite was brief. A masked bounty hunter, sleek and silent, cornered them near the harbor. Steel whispered from its sheath, gleaming under the torchlight. Elias drew his cutlass, stepping in front of Magdalena. "You've got terrible timing, friend." But this time, she did not cower. As the hunter lunged, Magdalena struck with a heavy iron candlestick, staggering their foe. Elias finished the fight with a swift strike, the masked man crumpling at their feet. Breathless, Elias turned to her, a rare grin breaking through. "You're getting rather good at this, sister." Magdalena smiled, not with pride, but with quiet resolve. "Faith is not passivity, Captain. Sometimes it demands action." And in that moment, amidst the stench of salt and sin, Elias realized something. He trusted her, not as a captive, but as a comrade. The days that followed were tense. The Crimson Vow limped back to sea, patched but vulnerable. Word had spread, Elias Vane's ship carried a nun who defied both church and crown. An insult the powerful would not let stand. At sunrise, the lookout's cry shattered the fragile calm. "Warship on the horizon, flying the king's colors." Elias' jaw tightened. A royal frigate, bristling with cannons, bore down upon them. Outgunned, outmanned, and with nowhere to run. His crew's faces, once bold, now flickered with doubt. In that moment, Magdalena stepped forward. She addressed the crew, her voice steady, ringing across the deck. "You feared death, but you faced worse. You've survived treachery, storms, and the weight of your own sins. Do not let them chain you again." The men, hardened by crime yet moved by her words, straightened. Even the most cynical among them saw not a nun, but a beacon in the fog. Elias joined her, resting a hand on her shoulder. "Well said, sister. Now, let's see if heaven favors fools." The battle erupted in a fury of cannon fire and splintered wood. Smoke swallowed the sea. The Crimson Vow danced between death and defiance, its crew fighting with a fire lit not by gold, but by newfound conviction. Then fate, or faith, intervened. The royal warship, blinded by smoke, struck a hidden reef. With a deafening crack, its hull split, swallowed by the merciless sea. Cheers erupted on the Crimson Vow, disbelief giving way to triumph. Some called it luck. Others, a miracle. Elias, panting, bloodied, found Magdalena amidst the chaos. For a heartbeat, he simply stared. "You prayed us through that storm, didn't you?" She offered a small, knowing smile. "Perhaps, Captain. Or perhaps you finally steered towards something greater than yourself." And for once, Elias couldn't argue. The sea had calmed, but something far greater had shifted aboard the Crimson Vow. The crew, once godless and greedy, carried a new glint in their eyes. Not fear, not superstition, something like hope. Days passed, and life aboard resumed its rhythm. Yet, Captain Elias Vane was no longer the same man. Gone was the mocking pirate who sneered at prayers. He found himself walking the decks at dusk, watching Magdalena kneel at the prow, her simple wooden cross glinting against the setting sun. This evening, he approached her without his usual bravado. "Sister," he began, his voice rough as gravel, "I've taken countless treasures. Sailed through storms, spilled blood for revenge. And yet, standing here, I wonder if I've been the greatest fool of all." Magdalena looked up, her gray eyes soft, but piercing. "It takes more courage to seek redemption than to wield a sword, Captain." He chuckled, shaking his head. "Elias Vane, redeemed. Now there's a tale no bard would dare sing. but his tone lacked its former bite. He took a breath, the words foreign on his tongue. Still, if you're willing, I'd like to learn what it means. To lower my flag. Not in surrender, but in peace. Magdalena smiled, not with triumph, but with quiet grace. She extended her hand. No chains, no conditions. Just an invitation. And for the first time in years, Elias Vane accepted something freely. As the crimson vow sailed into the golden embrace of twilight, its black sails shimmered like burnished gold. Pirate and nun stood side by side, not as captor and captive, but as fellow travelers. The rogue had not become a saint, but perhaps, in choosing a different course, he had found something rarer than gold. Salvation, one prayer at a time.